My name is Nakia White.
Stop. Nice thing, yeah.
So, my friends, again, my name is Nakia White. And this is what happens in a scandal.
Not the attention now for sure.
This is what happens in a scandal. You don't know it's happening. It doesn't have a race, it doesn't have a sex. And it hits you from out of nowhere. Let me know, I'm just trying to manage this. Yes, yeah. You know, so with the scandal, you just never know. And it happens really out of nowhere. It's indiscriminate. Yeah? So, am I doing this right? The third one? Okay. Clearly, I can manage scandals, but can't manage a But again, when scandals happen, there are no warnings whatsoever. They happen indiscriminately. For a crisis to happen, it has to coexist with a couple of things, and one of them is bad decisions. And another one is are traits. There are about 7 traits, according to Judy Smith. Judy Smith is someone that I deeply admire, and she is the person who Scandal was developed upon. But she talks about in her book, Good Self, Bad Self, the 7 traits of a scandal that must coexist for the recording. Okay, sorry. Okay, so the first one is ego. And we're going to talk about 7 traits, and in and of themselves, these traits aren't bad. Out of balance or combined with other traits, they are absolutely disastrous. So the first is ego, and we all have ego. And ego is not, again, a bad trait. It helps us, it drives us. It gives us a little bit of self-confidence and self-confidence that we need sometimes to jump hurdles. The second one is, and please, this is in no particular order, the second one is denial. And sometimes we find ourselves in crisis out of denial. We don't think it's going to happen. No, this isn't the situation, right? Or this person wouldn't do this. And you can find yourself in a situation not even knowing it. And we say, no, this person wouldn't do that. So that's denial. Fear. Some people act out of fear or don't act out of fear. Either way, when you're in a crisis, acting or inaction from fear, neither one are really good. Ambition. Again, another. Is this right? Okay, so this one seems better. Okay, in and of itself, ambition is not bad. I'm ambitious. I have friends that are in this audience that are ambitious. So ambition is not bad, but certainly, again, out of balance, and certainly, as we're going to see in some of the case studies, ambition mixed with ego is absolutely disastrous. Accommodation. We're accommodating someone. We want to make them feel comfortable. But all the while, we don't know that we're being used or that person is being used as a pawn for an upcoming crisis or scandal. Patience. We wait too long. And maybe this is coupled with fear or denial, but we wait too long. And so patience is the 6th. And the final is indulgence. Now, I've worked in the U.S., and I'll tell you a little bit about my background in a minute. I know Nakia told you a little bit, but indulgence is one of the traits that I find mostly in men when they're in crisis. So most of the men that I dealt with in the States, and I had to work with them in helping them out, a lot of it was ego, ambition, and indulgence. So we're going to talk about that again. So just to jump back a little bit, I worked in the United States for a couple of years. I worked with who was now a U.S. Senator. He was a mayor at the time. His name is Cory Booker. Incredibly popular, incredibly brilliant. So I worked with him for 6 years in a place called Newark, New Jersey in the USA. Did a little bit of everything for him. It really exciting time. It really was kind of the playground for me in terms of really honing my skills
and getting better at what I do. And so when I came to Kenya, it was kind of, I wanted to do some business stuff. But here I am, back in crisis management, political management, and I absolutely love it. And not only do I love what I do, but I absolutely love this country. So, now I can move forward. I should have done that before. So I want to talk to you about a couple of case studies. So we're going to do one case study that's going to be an international case study, and then the second case study is going to be a local case study. And I'm sure the local one everyone is familiar with. Certainly, I hope that I'm not that old where people don't know about Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. Okay. So, the fear monolith, the intelligence monster, and the denial assassin. These are three of the things that were present in this scandal with Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton. So, just to give you a little bit of background, Monica Lewinsky was a 21-year-old intern that was working at the White House. She was incredibly impressionable. You see her there with the blue dress and the cigars? That's funny. I thought that was funny. But incredibly impressionable. And in her book, she wrote that she thought that the president was undressing her with his eyes. He seduced her. So at 21, you're working at the White House, and the most powerful man in the world, you perceive him as seducing you. Right? And so they get into this relationship and of a sexual nature, though we're going to see where he says it wasn't. It was. Cigars included. I won't get into details. But they got into a sexual relationship. And from that really was probably one of the biggest scandals that we've seen since the Clinton era. And this is interesting because we all know that Hillary Clinton is running for political office. I think she's absolutely brilliant. I did a talk a couple of years ago, and I talked about Hillary and how brilliant she was and how smart she was and is. But this is still a backdrop. This is still a problem for them. And though it's not in the forefront, scandals like this, because it wasn't handled really well, still, it's almost like a scarlet letter. It sticks with you. So Bill, in his wisdom, perhaps out of fear, I don't know, this is what happened.
But I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never. These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work for the American people. Thank you.
Wasn't that incredible? That was believable. It was completely and absolutely believable. He had the hand motion going on, and it was like, I am serious about what I'm saying. And when you see a speaker do that or point, or as President Obama does this when he talks. But when you see a speaker do this, that means that they are serious and they are making a very clear point about what he does. And I remember being super young. I think I was maybe like 7. 6, not really, but I remember watching this, and I remember saying, wow, they're really trying to take down our president. They're really trying to take, what is going on here? And incredibly believable. But here's what happened when his back was up against the wall.
Good evening. This afternoon, in this room, on this chair, I testified before the Office of Independent Counsel and grand jury. I answered their questions truthfully, including questions about my private life, questions no American citizen would ever want to answer. Still, I must take complete responsibility for all my actions, both public and private. And that is why I'm speaking to you tonight. As you know,
In a deposition in January, I was asked questions about my relationship with Monica Lewinsky. While my answers were legally accurate, I did not volunteer information. Indeed, I did have a relationship with Ms. Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong. It constituted a critical lapse in judgment and a personal failure on my part, for which I am solely and completely responsible. But I told the grand jury today, and I say to you now, that at no time did I ask anyone to lie, to hide or destroy evidence.
He's lying. Yeah. And so the interesting thing about this is that he was caught red-handed. There was an independent prosecutor that took on the case. And I'm not sure if any of you remember around this time, there was a woman called Linda Tripp. So what happened with Monica Lewinsky is that she really built a really close relationship with Clinton, and his staff took notice. And then they sent her over to the Pentagon and right into the arms or the friendship of Linda Tripp. And Linda Tripp was the person that recorded the conversations, right, that she was having, because Monica was a 21-year-old, was a friend to a older woman and talking to her like, oh my goodness, I'm in love with the most powerful man in the world. And so Linda recorded all of these conversations. Said, keep the gifts, keep the blue dress that apparently had semen on it. And once the independent counsel found this out, or the independent prosecutor, he brought this up. Now, the interesting thing is that Monica Lewinsky sent in a deposition saying that she never had an affair with Bill Clinton and urged Linda Tripp to do the same. Linda Tripp, just so you know, worked for the Bushes for a number of years in public affairs. And so because she wasn't as liked, they moved her over to the Pentagon. So she really had something to prove. And this was the way she did it. But if I was old enough at the time and in the White House and advising the president, here is some of the advice I probably would have given him. Manage Monica. You knew what you did. You're the most powerful man in the country, in the world. Manage her. This is a young girl. Clearly she's in love. You know the relationship isn't going anywhere. You have a broader optic than she does. She's 21. She has very limited life experience at that point. Manage her. Talk to her. Or have your people talk to her. Lay out the land for her. Here's what your life looks like. You tell on the most powerful man in the world, here is what your life will look like post the tell. And not that, and it wasn't that she was being abused by him. It was a consensual relationship, right? So this is not a situation where they're saying don't tell and you've been abused. That is absolutely something I don't agree with. But certainly this was a consensual relationship and something that could have brought him down. So you manage her, you talk to her. Here's what your life will look like. What is it that you want to do in the future? Or you want to do that? Well, if you do this, the likelihood of that happening is not a reality, young lady. And offer her options. But they didn't do that. They sent her to the Pentagon. And he cut pretty much all communication with her, which made her antsy. We remember when we were 21, right? Made her a little bit antsy, made her a little bit anxious. Where is he? What is he doing? If that didn't work, then you negotiate with your foes. He had many. He was passing all of these bills, many of which weren't approved or liked by the Republican Party. Sometimes you have to, when you don't want to, you negotiate with your foes. I don't like you, you don't like me, okay, fine. But what can we do together? How can we fix it together? So I would have told him to negotiate. If all else fails, control your narrative. He had a whole team of people. He knew that he was being recorded, or Monica Lewinsky had been recorded. He knew that the story was about to break. At that point, He had the time, the power, the access. You control your narrative. You come out and you tell your story so that someone is not telling the story for you or before you. You control your narrative. You control your story. And from there, you can control the other parts of the scandal as much as you can once you're able to tell your truth. So those are the things I would have advised Bill Clinton to have done. And not that it would have been perfect at this point, but it certainly would have been, this is a president that is honorable and he tells the truth and da-da. Right? So a little bit better. Now, the next case study is of a local politician, with an S. Governor Evans Kidero and Women's Rep Rachel Shebesh, and the tale of the hot eagle in cold denial. 2 of the 7. It was more, but these are the main 2. So allegedly, Rachel and Kidero had an alleged friendship of an alleged nature, of which allegedly I don't allegedly know. It's all alleged. But certainly they had a working relationship, or they once did. So I remember one of the first times that I came here. Let me replay that again for you, because I don't think it's done. Wait, am I pressing the right button? Okay. Wait, Nakia. So this is when I was here just for a couple of weeks in 2013. And normally when I go to a new country, I read the newspaper and I watch local television. And this was one of the first things that I saw. And I watched it over and over again. And then my friends start emailing me about it. Hey, what's going on in Nairobi with a guy slapping a woman? And is he going to be impeached? What's going to happen? He's still in office. But the interesting thing, the interesting narrative around this is when I started to talk to people, because I'm always in conversation with people, because I always like to hear people's opinions on things, is that they said Shebesh deserved it. She deserved to be slapped. It was on social media. It was on Twitter. It was on Facebook. She deserved it. She was out of hand. She didn't know her place. She didn't know how to talk to a man in power. So she deserved it. Shocking to me. I'm still shocked. I see it, and it still just makes my hair stand on my arms. So I think we can attribute this clearly to ego. They both knew each other. They knew what pushed each other's buttons, right? She, I guess, was pushing his buttons. He was annoyed by the button pushing. But at that point, he could have made a very different decision. So, here is what happened to my disappointment next.
I don't remember slapping anybody.
Let me replay that for you, just so you feel it.
I don't remember slapping anybody.
So, slapped her. And then the next day, watching KTN, he says he doesn't remember. And then after that, he was on an interview, and he said that she grabbed his private parts. Now, I've looked at this video, I can't tell you how many times. And even if you see here, her hands are up in the air. So at what point does she have a chance to do that? And even still, he could have still made another choice. Huh? And it's just incredibly, that for me was definitely a scandal, and I had ideas of how I would have handled them both. But in my mind, there is no reason at all that any man should put his hands on a woman. There is absolutely no reason for that. None. And this is what he did, and he did it on live TV, and it went viral. So I'm going to get to the part where I would have made suggestions of how he would have handled it. But just let me ask you guys a question. 1 2 3 answers. What would you say to him if you were on his team? Anybody? Yes.
I would tell him to apologize in public.
Okay, apologize in public. Interesting. What else? Anybody else? Okay. Nobody wants to speak about it. Huh? Wait, I was going to say no one wants to speak about it because he's sitting governor.
I would ask him to apologize to her first personally, and then to show up in front of the cameras and show that he's apologized to her. Yeah, so that personally, so that it's not before the media, they understand, she understands that it's not on the media, and then bring it out to people. Yeah.
That's a good one. In fact, he did apologize publicly. Privately. That's private. No, not quite, right? But this was after they had a closed-door meeting, and they negotiated. This was a really unfortunate situation. While he didn't necessarily apologize, this was kind of a roundabout way of apologizing. And I'm still lost for words about this. But if I was managing him at the time, I wouldn't have told him to do that. That's ridiculous. So he knew her. They knew each other. They were colleagues before. So if you know that you're about to be in a confrontation, sometimes the best thing to do, unless you're ready to dig in your heels, and there's points where you dig in your heels in confrontation, absolutely. But other times you just kind of have to avoid it and wait for another day. This was not the time. So he could have avoided this. This is not certainly advice that I would have been able to get him up front, but definitely when you're in a situation, this is not to say you shrink like a willow, but this is to say, okay, I see where this is going. Let me just back up. And maybe I'll be able to revisit it, or maybe I'll be able to be in a better position or a vantage point later on. The second thing, this is the advice. I would have told him to admit it. Not get on KTN or NTV and deny that you don't remember or that she touched you inappropriately. A leader, what a leader does is a leader says, you know what, I messed up. And here's how I messed up. And here's how I'm going to fix it. A leader does not abscond from their mistakes. They own it.
and you want respect, respect and trust equity, you own your mistake. And you do everything in your power to fix it. Yeah? Sincere apology, which is someone said that. Sincere apology. Apologize. So I would have had him go behind closed doors, had a conversation with her, and apologize. The second thing I would have done immediately is write a press release, followed by a presser, where he would have been flanked by his wife and other women in the community. Give me 1 second. And other women in the community. And he would have said, I'm sincerely sorry, not only to Rachel Shebesh, but for embarrassing my wife and for every other woman in Kenya that has been abused by their husband. And from this day forward, I will make it right. Now, if you think, and I've heard this before, oh, Africa, people don't do that in Africa. Bull crap. You should try it. You should try it. I've lived in Kenya for 3 years. This is absolutely is not what people perceive in the United States. This is absolutely a civilized country with a level of humanity, a level of civility. And if you say that, then you're just as bad as him. You're absconding the responsibility of what you're supposed to do. Just on a human level, on an absolute human level, you sincerely apologize. You do a presser, and you roll out your plan of what you're gonna do. The next thing, I would have sent him on a tour of redemption with his own personal money. We would have gone to women's shelters and talked to women. What happened to you? How did it happen? Made him write a check from his own personal wallet for rehabilitation or an expansion of a facility. Again, if you think that this is Africa and it doesn't happen, it would have built a lot of brand equity and trust equity that he needs right now. I think it doesn't work here. It works. Because trust is universal. Brand is universal. Right? So he would have gone in his pocket, not out of the city council of Nairobi, his own personal pocket, and write out checks, because that's how sorry he is. That's how sorry he is. He's so sorry for what he did that he needs to make sure that he pays to make it right. Yeah? So, now I want to talk about lessons learned from both of these scandals. When in a crisis, when in a situation, you act quickly. You acknowledge it. Again, as a leader, whether it's a personal relationship, whether you're leading a company, or whatever it is, you have to act incredibly quickly. You may not have all the facts, but you say, listen, I acknowledge that this happened. We're doing everything in our power to make sure that we answer all of the questions, that we find out all the facts, and we promise to get back to you. You acknowledge it. You don't wait. Waiting just leaves so much room for rumors and gossip, and just not a good idea. Quickly have a plan. Have a plan of how you're going to address it. And even if it's a small portion of it, have a plan. And if you can't figure out a plan, you hire somebody like me. Yeah? That can help you develop a plan, and a smart one. And don't be afraid to revisit your plan, because sometimes in scandals things change, especially in politics. We know this, and in companies. You know, we did the recent scandal or crisis with Chase Bank. Things happen consistently and constantly, and they're constantly changing and they're shifting. So don't be afraid to revisit your plan and change it and update it. Negotiate when and if you can. If you can stop a scandal from hitting the newspapers, and you can negotiate before then, and negotiate in good faith. Not negotiate to cover up a lie, but really negotiate in good faith because you made a mistake. If you can do that, then you should. Build your base. So the advice, I said build you base. Build your base is what I meant. Build your base. And again, when you're in trouble, because you've done everything to build your base, now you can dig in and pull from that well that you created. And sometimes when you're in trouble, you need to pull from that well and have people flanked that believe and trust you and that know that you've done the right thing in the past and this was just a small indiscretion or a small mistake. Build your trust equity. Do what you say you're going to do. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. That's what integrity is. Integrity is keeping your word. Integrity is if you can't do it, you say you can't do it. That's integrity. Build your trust equity. And finally, always remember that crises are opportunities to be great. You can rise from the ashes like a phoenix. Crises in and of themselves aren't bad. They're a chance for companies to rebrand. They're a chance for you to really rethink where you are and be better about what you do and the decisions that you make. Going through a crisis is absolute hell. Figuring out how you got there and what to do, but if you have a plan, the other side of it can be absolutely amazing. Okay? Thank you so much. Again, my name is Nakia White, and I'm the managing partner at Global Ladder Africa. Thank you for your time. So now we're going to have a question-answer session led by Jabari, and I think we have our first question right behind you.
All right. You have a seat in the center. The Queen's throne. All right. Good evening, everyone. Let's make some noise for Nakia once again for an amazing presentation. You are amazing. I'm Jabari Smith, a great friend of Nakia. We actually met in this room almost 3 years ago when we were both very new to Kenya, so it's amazing to see how your journey has unfolded. Congratulations. Who had the first question? Okay, yes, I know this guy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Odanga Madung. I am the co-founder of a data science company here in Kenya, and I had a few questions. Okay, I think you answered a bit of my questions to do with the Evans Kidero situation. However, I wanted to ask, where do political approval ratings come into play in the case of a scandal like Kidero's, whereby, you talked about perceptions such as the idea that, in Africa, or in specifically African society, it's very hard for you to think or even fathom of a governor being impeached because he slapped a woman. And what was interesting is that it's only mostly, if I could just think about in rough memory, it was mostly the women MPs who came out strongly against Kidero. However, there was no support from the other side of the house. So how can you promote action in such a case? Because he might as well not done anything, and it wouldn't have affected what could, or rather the perceptions the people had towards him. If anything, a lot of people were laughing at home. The video went viral more for reasons of the chick shouting, "ah, yeah, yeah, yeah," than, the fact that she was slapped. I think that is something probably I'd want your insight on. Number two, of course, I would want to also ask, what role does data play in this specific case of trying to manage a crisis? What could it reveal? Because you're talking about, I don't know which case you did talk about something to do with social. Oh yeah, it was still Kidero's, whereby people were talking on social media about this whole thing. But how can we use all that, or do you use all that to inform how you go ahead and make decisions with regard to the action plans that you set aside here? So you can take it away.
Here we go. So the first question was a really good question, and that was, it really made no difference. I disagree with you. It did, right? What did he have after that? He had a fight with the Matatu drivers. Remember that? Where they went on strike, and that was a huge hit to the constituency, right? And so you have. There are holes in the roads, but he has lights up that are blinking in your face. People were pissed about that. And apparently, allegedly, cameras don't allegedly record allegedly. Right? So now you have the slap, the fight with the Matatu. And I think the whole thing with the alleged accusation that he paid to win his election. So no, perhaps that one thing in and of itself didn't impact him, but all of them together are impactful. And and maybe you guys know better than I do, has he done very much to build brand equity where people can support him and trust him? Has he done very much to build brand trust? Okay, those things are important. So perhaps in and of itself, in this context, it didn't work. But when you add that with everything else over the duration that he's been governor, it hasn't been helpful. So that's your first question. The second question in terms of data for social media is really important because what we have to do is track what happens on social. We're working with someone right now where we're tracking everything that happens on social media. We answer those questions, we reply, or we do kind of updating of these searches so that we hear as many positive stories as we can. So the data of that, while it's qualitative, is still important data for us to understand how we need to handle an issue or if there's something else that might be coming that we may not know about. So it's important in that way. So very quantitative data, not necessarily, but the qualitative data that social media gives us is incredibly important. So I hope that answered your question. It did? Okay. Hi, Rodney.
Hi, Nakia. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rod Boga.
Mm-hmm.
From the Kidero scenario, you talked about one avoiding confrontation. Would you kindly tell me how many times one should avoid confrontation of the same scenario? Maybe it's your wife who is coming to you to provoke you in the same scenario.
So you hit her? Is that what you do?
No,
Okay.
it's a question I'm asking.
Okay.
So that you can tell me how many times I should avoid the same confrontation and how should I avoid it.
Okay.
Then another question. You've talked very passionately that you would not approve a man raising his hand on a woman. Would you approve a woman raising her hand on a man?
Okay, so let me deal with the first question first. I think there's something to be said if you're constantly in confrontations, right? And you're constantly in these really, really tough confrontations, then clearly you have to take a deeper look at how you build relationships or lack thereof, right? And that goes to emotional intelligence. You have to have a bit of emotional intelligence to say, I'm kind of pissing a lot of people off. Let me fix this for a second. So I think that's part of it. So if you're constantly in a confrontation, in a serious confrontation, because everybody gets in tiffs every once in a while, whether it's with a Matatu driver, whatever, you know that happens. But if you're in constant, serious tiffs, then there's a problem that you need to look deeper at, right? And I don't think that any aggressive action in that way, unless it's Russia or North Korea that's acting like crazies. I mean, unless it's something like that, you just really have to be wise in how you deal with these situations and really be thoughtful. In terms of a woman hitting a man, okay, so just the bare nature of it. Men are by nature stronger than women. by nature, right? So when a man raises a hand to hit a woman, the leverage and the muscle that goes into that and the energy that goes in that is much greater than a woman hitting a man. Now I'm not saying that it's okay for a woman to hit a man. It's not okay for anybody to hit anyone. That's not okay either way. Now, if you're in a situation where a woman is hitting a man or a man is hitting a woman, then you need to get out that situation because it doesn't seem very nice. It doesn't seem very healthy. I would run. So no, I don't think that it's okay for that to happen. Was that okay? Okay. All right. Hey.
Hi. My name is Norbert. I work with a digital PR and communications company with a bias towards government.
Which one?
It's called After Six.
After Six, okay.
Yes, with a bias towards government. I have 3 questions. Number 1 is...
You guys with these 8-part questions. Go ahead.
Looking at the Kidero situation.
Right.
You said the second thing to do is admit it and apologize for it. So what happens if the client is actually not apologetic about it? What are you supposed to do? That's my number 1 question. Number 2, the whole thing we're saying here about this is Africa and some cultural aspects do come into play. The way I look at it, that's a context issue. Right? It's a very different context. There are some things that do matter in this market.
Yes.
So the question is, to what extent does that context come into play? Because you look at a country like this, impeachment is literally, it's almost impossible. No matter what you do, it's not going to happen. So to what extent does your plan have to include the context you're dealing with? Maybe going with what he went with made sense for this market. Number 3 question was...
Can I answer the first 2 and then you think about the third?
Sure.
Okay, all right. That's negotiation 101. So let me answer this second question. So the second question is, the context. I would have to be very passionate about this. I've been here for almost 3 years, and I absolutely love this country. And I think that this is a absolutely civilized, human, passionate, amazing country. And I just think that that a man hitting a woman is not contextual. It shouldn't matter the context that we live in or the context that you're in. It is absolutely wrong, right? That's as simple as black and white. It is absolutely wrong. So the context, perhaps desensitization or whatever, just doesn't matter. It's not right whether it was because people thought she was a loudmouth or not. Just not something that's morally right. And this is mostly a Christian country. So, and if we believe in morals, then that's it. To answer your first question about impeachment, certainly, okay, he couldn't get impeached, but he sure can get arrested. No? He can't get arrested.
You see, that's the question. That's the thing. It's all about the context. And then just the point you've just brought up, the morality question. At what point or to what extent does your own sense of morality come into the whole thing? Because this is my job, and I want to keep away my opinions about the whole thing from the whole thing. So to what extent, maybe I don't agree with what he has done. To what extent do I bring in my emotions into it?
So here's the thing. That may not be a good fit for our company. He may not be a good fit for us. So part of what we do is help people to tell their truths and to stand in the light and be honest about where they are and helping them to build a career, right? And we have to be empowered with that information so that we can build and talk about what your next steps are, whether it's, being an ambassador, a minister, a president. We need to have those conversations. Right? But if that's not something that's present, then that just may not be a great fit for Global Ladder Africa. And we're okay with that. We wish you the best, but it's just not a great fit.
Random question. Is lying ever a good strategy?
Is who?
Is lying ever a good strategy?
Okay. Because is lying ever a good strategy? I don't think lying is ever a good strategy. I don't think it's a good strategy.
I don't think it's a good strategy. And I think, we saw our first case study with Bill Clinton. He lied. And, he only apologized because his back was up against the wall. And when you apologize after you've lied and your back is up against the wall, it seems much more insincere and forced and produced than it would have at the very beginning. So no, lying is not a promoted tactic.
I think I'm taking this I'm introducing myself. I'm taking this very serious.
Okay, I'm going to be serious with you. Okay.
And why I'm sitting here, my name's Akola Howie.
Uh-huh.
I work for an organization called Usalama Forum.
Mm-hmm.
I work on violence prevention and safety. I think what you're presenting is a very important topic, which I'm very interested about. And you didn't go further to talk about trauma, because you just talked about talking about it and apologizing about it. But I've not heard you talking about the aftermath, because here we are dealing with issues of psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And human psychology is about emotions and it's about behaviors. So how do you go deep and reconcile these two people?
Mm-hmm.
That is one. Two, on the issue that you're trying to present on crisis, the issue of children and parents, I think that's another thing that you need also to explain to us, because this has contributed to children becoming violence and engaging in crime.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted you to open that kind of a topic, and I really appreciate what you're doing for us. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I think the first question was about talking about kind of the aftermath, the trauma that happens, the post incident, and how do you deal with it. I think if I was her crisis manager and helped her, I think that definitely would have been part of my strategy, is definitely understanding that there's something deeper that's going on and really putting her in a place where she can get the kind of help that she needed. But unfortunately, I only focused on Kidero, but I promise next time to focus on both people. But certainly that would have, I agree with you, it would have been part of my strategy for her. His would have been much different than hers. Certainly she was the victim in this situation. As to your second point about parents and children and kind of the aftermath and the secondhand effect of child raising, I think that that's another dynamic of sociology that I necessarily am not an expert in. So when it comes to kind of doing this piece, I can say that I'm really, really good at it. But when it comes to kind of the child, mother, father dynamic, while I'm able to help with that, it certainly is not my expertise. And for that, I would definitely refer my client, had there been a situation, to some intensive counseling and some ongoing therapy. But I hope that answers your question.
Hello, my name is Calvin Jodisi.
Hi, Calvin.
And I work for an organization called Change Mind, Change Future. It's a mentorship organization, and then also do other things as well. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Kidero, and also just want to ask a question regard to how do you maybe cover the like the affected person perception to the public. For example, when Kidero slapped Shebesh, people said, number one, oh, this lady is always
making trouble
and all that. And then, obviously, she also had her past, like, she alleged to maybe sleep with so-and-so, blah,
allegedly.
blah, blah. Allegedly.
With
yes.
the pictures on the internet, allegedly.
Yes, something like that.
Okay.
That's how I've used that.
Okay.
So how does she cover up so that, now that slap does not turn to be now her looked as like the bad person, like she deserved it, like you should have maybe even give her a blow or something like that. So how did somebody cover that, than people not using their past to kind of judge that to be the right thing? Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. I think that we can look at so many examples throughout the world where, you know, your past precedes you, right? What you've done, the mistakes that you've made, really precedes you, and so sometimes that's hard to mitigate. You can soften kind of the perception, and certainly for somebody like Shebesh, there's a number of things that I would have done for her that would have been incredibly helpful in starting her brand, and clearly it appeared that there was some issues that she was having, because certainly after the slap with Shebesh, then there was the social media campaign by Sonko, yeah, with pictures of her in the bed together and stuff like that. So there's something deeper going on. So I certainly would have handled it at that very, very deep level first. Everyone's like, don't say that. But I would have handled it at that very, very deep level first before we even talked about rebranding and coming back out. Because there's something there that needs to be handled, because I can do the brand, I can do the superficial thing. But if you don't handle that stuff, it's going to happen again. It's just going to happen again. And so you have to handle that stuff first before you move on. Yes.
Sorry, hi.
Hi.
I'm Gladys.
Hi, Gladys.
I was just curious, you mentioned Chase Bank. How would you have handled that? And also, when it comes to organizations globally, we've been seeing a lot of things going on. Recalls, mostly automobile manufacturers, but also food product companies also recalling their products. How would you handle such a situation, especially when their shareholders may not want the truth to be told?
Well, I think I always say that shareholders and lawyers are like the biggest headaches to deal with when you're in crisis management, because they never want, shareholders don't want the truth necessarily to be told because they're worried about it's going to affect the bottom line. Lawyers don't want the truth to be told because the liability issues later on. So both the attorneys, which are amazing, I love attorneys, shareholders, I love shareholders too, but I think when you're in a crisis, sometimes it can become cumbersome. So in dealing with that, you have to come out with a plan. Right? And so that plan is, okay, fine, you don't want to tell the truth that this stuff is bad, but then you need to understand that your brand is going to be affected and no one's going to trust you. And if you think that your bottom line is hurting now, just wait. Because if this stuff keeps on coming out over and over again and kids are getting sick or they're falling out of their carriages or something happened. So if you don't want to tell the truth and fix it right now, you just wait. And you're worried about the bottom line? Give it 2 years, give it 6 months, and you'll see what happens with your bottom line. So at the very beginning, you have to have a plan of how you're going to fix it, and you have to execute on that plan. There's so many brands that have done it exceptionally well. They've done it exceptionally well. So I think for that, shareholders, attorneys, and maybe some EDs might have issue with that, and share people. But you have to kind of lay out the lay of the land for them and saying, all right, you don't want to tell the truth, I'll just let you know what happens, and it's up to you. Because at the end of the day, it's up to that company to make that decision of the way. You can give them the best advice in the world. It's like telling your kid, don't touch the stove, you're going to get burnt. And they touch the stove, and guess what happens? They get burnt. So it's the same thing. Like you can give as much advice as you want, but it's really up to that politician, that person, that company to take the wise advice. They hire people like me because they need me, not just for show. And if you don't want to listen, that's on you. I mean, I can only come up with a really amazing, terrific, fantastic plan that'll save your company, but if you don't want to listen, I mean, okay. Did that answer your question? Huh? Only first part? Okay. Chase Bank. Okay, so I think with Chase Bank, lost a lot of brand and trust equity immediately by closing the bank suddenly and by the directors kind of, taking all of these loans and not without security and buffering them. I think what I would have advised is that the CEO immediately come out and do damage control, and they had a press release and a press conference. We still haven't heard from anybody from Chase Bank, right? We've been hearing from the government and people like that, but we haven't really heard anything from them. So you have to kind of come out and say, hey, we know we kind of messed up, but again, here's our plan and here's how we think we're gonna make it better. Because when they open back up, how many customers are they gonna have left? They've done absolutely nothing. They've been absolutely silent. They haven't acted with urgency. They haven't acted with trust. So how many customers do they think they're gonna have when they open back up? Everybody's gonna shift. I would, wouldn't you? Yeah? Okay. Was that okay? Okay.
Okay, my name is Levi.
Hi, Levi.
Hey there. Good to see you, Nakia. And thank you very much for taking us through the case studies. I run a growing and small marketing integrated communications firm. Mm-hmm. And other than being a Clinton fan and a fan of the Clintons, and anyway, first to my question, Donald Trump, the more, he has scandals or, all this crisis, the more it seems like opportunities for him. So could you comment something about that? And then the other question is the NYS scandal. I'm sure you're familiar with Anwar Guru. Assume Anwar Guru comes to you right now and tells you, redeem me. What would you do? Thank you.
Okay, let's deal with the first one. Let's deal with the first one first. I think what we're seeing with Donald Trump is the same thing that America saw with Ebola, right? What America saw with Ebola is just complete and absolute coverage about Ebola. The African nation, all of them have Ebola. They're a bunch of zombies, and they're going to come over, and they're going to wipe out all of America, so let's close the borders. That's what we saw, right? And that was so far from the truth. It was such a small population, and I wrote a piece about this for a political newspaper in the U.S. But there was so much angst around this, and it just didn't make very much sense because there was such, if you look at the population of where Ebola was, it was such a huge population, and then the people that had Ebola was such a small portion of that it wasn't even an epidemic, a pandemic, it was no demic, really. But the way that it was publicized was such a big thing. And that's the way that we're seeing the international news here with Trump, is that it's such a big thing. And almost every Kenyan that I talk to, they're like, Trump is gonna win. Like literally eyes glazed over. They're like, Trump is gonna win, Trump is gonna win. Like, they are like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And it's not true. Trump is not going to win. And I think for him, what you're seeing and what we're seeing in terms of international media and our news feed here about Trump is that he is this really wildly popular guy. But understand, that's only for a certain segment of the population. I believe in democracy. I'm a true believer in democracy. I say it all the time. And I believe that the democratic process will not allow Trump to win, number one. And I also believe that Americans are much more savvy and much more smart than to let a guy at the slightest prickle goes off, be the president of the United States and have to deal with somebody like Putin or Jong-un. There's no way. So to your point, yes, I mean I think what we see even on social media, it really does focus a lot on Donald Trump, and because he's a newsmaker, And what does the media like? For those of you who are media or media related, they like controversy, and he sells commercials, and he sells airtime, and people watch, and their Nielsen numbers go up. But that's not the reality of America. That's the reality of a portion of America, but that's not what America is made of. Okay, now Anwar Guru.
Again, I think, there's redeeming qualities in everybody. Everybody can make it through a crisis okay. But I think you also have to have the propensity to listen and to want to change and to want to do the right thing. And certainly if she had the real deep propensity to do that, we would, advise her in a number of different ways of things to do. But I think her crises have been a lot for a long time. And that really does speak to a particular characteristic. And so unless that deep characteristic was changed in some way, it would be, it would be something that we would look really deeply at before we commit it. Thank you. Okay.
I have a question. On the topic of Rachel Shebesh and Waiguru and even Hillary Clinton, it seems that women in politics are always judged far more critically, held at unattainable standards that male politicians don't have to contend with. So my question is, why do you think that is, one? And do you find that managing female or women in politics is different than managing your male clients? Because I've found that in my decision making around determining who to vote for US president, I found myself really seeing the patriarchy in American society rear its ugly head, and really realizing that many people are talking trash about Hillary simply because she's a woman. Bernie Sanders can show up like the mad scientist and everyone's like, he's amazing. But Hillary Clinton wears an off-color suit and she's the devil in heels. So why do you think that women in politics are villainized in that way? And again, what do you do when dealing with your women political clients as opposed to your male political clients?
So I think that's a really, really good question, actually. I think it's a patriarchal society, number one, and I think we can all admit that in the U.S., and while there are strives to bring about equality, at the end of the day, decisions are made by white males, right? Between the ages of 45 and 65. Those are where the decision bases are made. And so that's the reality. Here, the decisions are made by African males or Kenyan males. And so women, while we are starting to be at the table, we're not quite there yet, and we have a little bit more to do, a couple of more hills to climb. You can call it historical, you can call it societal, but I think that we can all admit or agree that that's where we are right now, and moving the scale or moving the needle to change. In terms of so I can speak personally. I was a woman and I ran for office twice in Newark, New Jersey, and it was hard. It was really tough. So I had notes put under my door. I had blogs written about me. I had all kinds of nasty things said about me. And the male counterparts, hardly anything. And I can tell you, sitting in that seat, not even helping someone, but sitting in that seat as a woman, it is really tough because you question everything that's in you. Am I really a bad person? Am I really horrible? Am I really? So for somebody like Clinton, I deeply, deeply, deeply admire her because she's on a whole nother stage that I didn't even touch. And so what she's dealing with now and the rhetoric that she's dealing with now is real. But with that being said, there is a bit, and people are questioning this, not me, I'm just saying people, are questioning her authenticity. So she was just on a radio show in the United States, and she said she had hot sauce in her bag. Swag, right? So the pandering, and so I think that necessarily doesn't help. Not that it should be excused for her to be kind of beat up in the media, but certainly that piece doesn't help. But all in all, I do think that she's absolutely incredible, and I think she might be our next president. Perhaps Bernie Sanders, but
are there crises that are gender agnostic? Because, I mean, if we like to, there's this picture that people like to paint that the NYS scandal was a case of Anne Waiguru, being a woman, being criticized harshly. But I like to point out that in this same government, we've had an internal security minister who happened to have been a chef or something before, who was also literally thrown under the bus and probably judged much more harshly than she was. Yeah, in Brazil, you've got a president who's being impeached for a government, I mean, for having a government that is heavily corrupt, yeah, and is driving... She was corrupt as well. And so, you know, in that specific case, I do understand that maybe there might be a difference. But if something is wrong, isn't it just wrong? And maybe sometimes some people, because I believe that also, let's say in the case, we've had one other lady being ousted from government, Charity Ngilu. Yes, but she wasn't ousted with as much fanfare as Waiguru. And as much as she was ousted, there were 3 other men who were ousted instead of her as well. So, I mean, my question is, you know, is the gender argument when it comes to crisis and the judgment that follows crisis, the stone throwing that people tend to do after a crisis has happened, is it a right argument? That's my question.
Gender, what was the word again, that big word?
Udanga. Gender agnostic.
Yes, gender agnostic, that word. Yeah, so I do think that things are gender agnostic. I do think that, you know, some women are picked on, you know, or not picked on, maybe that's the wrong terminology, but I do think women in some situations, especially in situations like Anne Waiguru, who had an incredibly powerful position, who was controlling and managing almost $1 billion USD. Yeah, she's going to be under tremendous pressure, and they're going to target her probably much more fiercely than they would have a man. So I can say, personally speaking, and as a woman, and being in the situation myself, that yes, there are situations that where women are dealt unfairly, much more unfairly than a woman would be. So, simple, short answer, yes, to that 4-syllable word. Mm-hmm.
All right. I have a comment which you're more than welcome to respond to. I just want to go back to the cultural thing.
Yes.
And it feels to me as if it's a gray area. Obviously, there's some things like, you know, if you're going to hit on a woman, then that's an absolute no-no. Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking, so 2 scenarios. In African society, it's a husband-to-be is more likely going to pay dowry, you know, for his wife-to-be. It's perfectly acceptable, whereas in other cultures, it may be, why are you putting a price tag on a woman? So in that scenario in Kenya, if a politician was one day outed for not having finished paying his dowry, I think culturally it should be, you know, it isn't really something, you know, that we want to pay too much attention to just because that's perfectly acceptable, you know, in Kenya. Mm-hmm. Or even closer to home, when our former president, Mwai Kibaki, when he allegedly had, you know, another wife, you know, who I think they allegedly had some kids as well, a daughter, you know, and then...
Allegedly.
Yeah, I think it would have been perfectly acceptable because polygamy is allowed in our culture and even by law. So it might have been acceptable other than going on national TV stations with his wife, standing right next to him and saying, I have only one wife, Lucy Kibaki. I think it might have been perfectly acceptable for him to say, yeah, you know what, yeah, I married someone else as well.
Yeah.
So that's my comment. My question was what? I forget.
Come back.
I will.
Okay.
Yeah, let's come back.
Okay.
Get this gentleman.
But that's a good point, actually. I think that those are contextually something that we can point to. But hitting a woman is black and white. Yeah?
Thank you so much for your presentation and for the entire forum. Mm-hmm. My name is Sunstar Peterson. I am born in the island of Barbados. I'm a citizen of Canada.
Oh.
Been in Kenya for 5 years, so I kind of feel you in terms of being here recently as well. Let me go back. I don't have a question, but when you asked us before about how we would have advised Evans Kidero, it's not that I didn't have suggestions, but my mind was so up in a conflict over the fact that something like that can happen whether in this nation or any nation and be able to stand. Or that people would even in any way consider whether it's wrong or right based on the whole gender issue. I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I'm actually a father of 4 girls right now. So when I hear things like that being tossed back and forth, I cannot even begin to, the thought can't even run across my mind to hit my wife or to think that we can live in a society where anyone can think that hitting a female is okay. I'm one of these people that's coming from way back when it comes to my value system. I do believe that chivalry is not dead. I do believe that men should honor women. I still believe in opening car doors or any doors or whatever, treating a female, as the Bible says, as the weaker of the sexes, not mentally, not emotionally, but physically. I believe that a man has been given the power that he has to be a protector, not to be a slapper. I was here in Kenya when all of that media circus was going on. And all of these news stations, they not only showed the slap, but you might remember they showed it, plop, 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 plop. It was like, you know, people were reveling in this as though, anyhow. So just to be very, very clear, and I believe even the question that your colleague asked about Hillary Clinton, personally, the reason why I told you I was a Canadian, because I don't want this to come across as being biased, but I believe that we are looking at the first female president of the United States is on the horizon. That's my personal belief. I totally agree with you that I'm just waiting to see Donald Trump self-destruct, because his pride level and his level of ego is so high that he cannot help but self-destruct. And I believe that what we see of him and the way he is a media hound, he's not only going to self-destruct, but he's going to do it publicly. That's my personal opinion looking at the whole situation. Lastly, I want to say that we're dealing with something that is so deep and goes back so many centuries, millennia, this whole issue of why a woman is held to a different standard in our societies, not just here, as you said, in the United States, all around the world. But I want to also say this as a note of encouragement, that if you look at the past 100 years, against thousands of years, women have come so far. And I believe that that momentum is happening, and it's going to continue. And one of the big factors in that is when men begin to realize that we have nothing to fear from females being empowered and be a part of the mechanism that ensures that everyone is empowered in our societies and that nobody becomes a victim.
So let me just say, because I know we're running short on time. Yes, Nakia? Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to be really quickly. I'm absolutely obsessed with the presidential election right now. My roommate who's here, who's sitting in the first row, she can tell you, I'm absolutely obsessed with this election. And here's, and I know that this is not part of the topic, but here are my thoughts on that.
I think that yes, Trump has the biggest ego of anybody that we've probably ever seen. He is a self-professed king in his eyes, right? And is does everything perfectly, and we will win, and we will build wars, and that. But here's what I'm seeing with Trump, and here's there's a couple of things. One, I like Trump for one reason. I like Trump is because he's pulled the veil off of the Republican Party, right? He's very clear that he's a xenophobe, he's a sexist, he's a racist. He's very, very, very clear about that. And I don't think that any other we all knew the Republican Party were all of these kind of things, but he's been very, very clear about that. And I think that's opening up conversation about, in America about, where we are. Racism is still an issue. Black folks in the United States just got the right to vote in the 60s. So race is still Jim Crow was still a factor in the 60s. So I think that we are, so I appreciate Trump for that. I do, for bringing around those conversations about, sexism, racism, xenophobia, like not allowing Muslims into a country is absolutely ridiculous. Even the Muslims out there are protected by the First Amendment, right? And the First Amendment in the United States says that you are protected regardless of race, creed, nationality. And so you can't just decide, I'm going to throw somebody out because of that, or I'm not going to let someone in. That's not American. That's not what America is made of. But what is terrifying me about Trump right now is that now you're starting to see him kind of make a little turn. At the very beginning, he was like, wall, 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 out Muslims, women are horrible, blah, 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 blah. But now you're starting to see him make a little bit of a turn. He's becoming a little bit softer, a little bit more moderate, and you're going to see that as soon as the Republican-Democrat primaries are over. My fear is if he runs against somebody like a Hillary Clinton, the likelihood of him winning is pretty strong, in my opinion. And here's why. Because what we're seeing in America, right, what you're seeing right now with Trump and why Trump is so popular is because Americans are either going further right, becoming super conservative, right? Limiting a woman's right to make a choice about her life, limiting the Voters Act of 1960, I think 3 or 67. So America's either becoming really conservative or really socialist. And they're not going for status quo. And so when you look at a Trump is really kind of non-status quo. When you look at a Bernie Sanders is really not a status quo. You look at Hillary is square in the middle of status quo. Square in the middle. She's an insider. She's inside the belt. She's taken money from hedge funds. She's voted for the wars. I mean, everything that a status quo politician would do, she has done. Now you put her up against a very, very moderate, non-status quo Donald Trump. Polls are showing that she doesn't win. Polls are showing that he wins by 7, 8, 9%. You put him up against Sanders. Polls are showing that Sanders wins by 12 to 15%, all the way down the line against Cruz, Kesh, and Trump. He's winning, almost in double digits. So that's a nervous thing for me. I really, 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 really like Hillary. I do. But she is, as many Americans think, she's status quo. And you put her up against a non-status quo candidate, and I think we're up for a pretty decent fight. Cory Booker is probably one of my favorite people. He has really done a lot for my career. Just in knowing him and kind of talking to him. But do I think that he will be a running mate for Hillary Clinton? I think there are conversations. There have been conversations for a number of years about that. I think the only thing that would inhibit him from being a running mate is his newness,
is because he's just a first-term senator and he's not even done with his first term yet. So, but I think my opinion is that he would make an amazing running mate. He is smart and brilliant and dynamic, and he's all of the things that you want, and he really does believe in building people and building policy. So I think you couldn't find a better running mate. I think the only thing that may kind of not be the thing that gets him over is that he's pretty new in the political world. Okay. Oh, wait, you have a question. I think there's two questions. Hi.
Hi,
How are you?
My name is Emma, for those who don't know me. I work with a digital agency called Brand Design Development. My question, just to divert from the politics, is how do you know when to redeem a client? What are the factors you consider? How do you know when to redeem them or to just let it go, like you're done?
I can tell you, it's important to know when to fire a client. Yeah, it's important to know when to take a client. And I think for me, I want a client who understands the value that we bring as a company and the value that I bring, and who's going to listen and follow through and do what they say they're going to do, and who's really working to make it right. And I think those are kind of important factors for me, and I kind of see that at the very beginning. Like, we have a client right now who is just stellar. Anything that we in our plan that we say to do, he does. And he is seeing and will continue to see the success from that. But really, I think that is important for us, is how much you're going to listen. And then if we have a client and we get them out of trouble, and then all of a sudden they start to do the same thing, then we kind of have to end that relationship, because we don't want to be known as kind of, helping someone to continue to like be the worst of who they can be. That's not what we're about. No. Let me rephrase that. I answered that too quickly. Yes, people can be redeemed. Everyone can be redeemed, but you have to have a willingness to be redeemed. There has to be a willingness there. If you want to be redeemed very superficially or just for the first week, then that redemption is as good as, a flat tire. It's no good. There's always a strategy. There's always a strategy. Always a strategy. There's always a way out. And listen, the way out may not be that you come out like with fairy tales and swimming and speaking in front of Bloomberg and all of this other stuff, but the mitigation plan might limit the damage to your reputation, to your brand, or to whatever. So I think everyone's redeemable if they're willing to do the work around it. And I think that no matter how bad the crisis is, there's always a plan that will help you to mitigate that crisis, whether you come out on top or at least a little less for the wear at the end. Okay? All right, I think this is my... Okay, fine. Okay, all right.
My name is Kevin Wabungo.
Hi, Kevin Wabungo.
Thank you very much. I'm fine. I have two questions. Number one is, there's always a plan, a crisis management plan, which works very well and it's executed very well. However, it's after the plan is where I would seem to find a laxity or a lack of direction. Say, for example, the recent Lion fiasco by KWS. They did well in informing the people what to do.
They shot Mohawk, right? What was his name?
They shot Mohawk for understandable reasons. But
because understandable reasons, because they didn't have tranquilizers.
Anyway, my question is, after that, they have not come out and said anything, or what are the steps one should do to build on that negative that they got. Yeah, number one. Number two is, what would be like your tipping point in terms of learning? Either what book would you advise us to read, or what movie would you tell us to watch that would guide us in some of the steps you've mentioned to us?
I think one of my favorite books, so right now I can tell you I'm rereading Tipping Point. I just got 2 books on the 2013 elections that I'm kind of skimming through. I've read Good Self, Bad Self. I'm getting on a plane in the next couple of weeks. I probably will be reading that again. So I think if you can read books like Good Self, Bad Self, Tipping Point, I'm a huge fan of Malcolm Gladwell. So I just love all of the books from Who Saw the Dog, Tipping Point, Outliers. Some of my favorite books are there. There's also a really, really, really good book if you guys are interested in politics by Nate Silver. I'm sorry? Yeah, that Nate Silver is the young guy, super young, who really did a lot of the strategy, political strategy, and some of the digital strategy to help Obama win in 2008. He is now on Hillary Clinton's team, but absolutely brilliant, brilliant guy, and is able to look at numbers in a way that's just magical to me. Just like Malcolm Gladwell, I like people who can take numbers and just make pictures out of the numbers, and that's what they were able to do. So I think right now, those are the books that I would say read, and those are some of the books that I really admire and read. So, and then there was one final question.
Hi.
Did I answer both of your questions? No, the one about the lion and I think KWS have had a number of issues, and they constantly have issues, whether it's whether it's guards being kind of bribed to kill a rhino or an elephant, or I think KWS has just some systemic issues. So it's not a surprise to me. I don't know what I would advise them, actually, because it's just not a surprise to me that they just haven't come out, because they've had a history of issues, and they really are the front line for protecting really part of what makes Kenya special. And we've seen it over and over again. What, they just found a couple of tons of tusks not too long ago and burnt them? But these are the guys that are front line. And listen, not to say that they're bad, and they're ill-equipped, and they don't have enough staff, and there's a number, I think, of systemic things that have to be fixed, and so they need to do some deep work before anything. Otherwise, they can come out and say whatever, and it means nothing because they've done no work to make it better. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Hi, Paris Mwangi.
Hi, Paris.
My question basically goes, let's assume Shebesh, in this case, wants to be, what do I call it? She wants to be redeemed. And given the fact that all her scandals are based on sexual, allegedly, how would you redeem her?
I think someone asked a similar question earlier about that. So I think based on that, you can see, right? And these are and when you see people on social media and TV, these are really like snapshots or clips of their life. And so you can look at that and say, there's something else going on here. There's some kind of, periods and dots in between that are not really being filled in. So I think the same thing that I said earlier is that she would have to do some deep work first, and really figuring out problem after problem. There's some underlying, there's some baseline that's just not being addressed. So we would try to figure what that baseline is, address it in the best way that we can, so that then we can come out with a plan. Because again, I really do believe in kind of, when people are in scandal after scandal, there's some baseline things that are going on, and unless those are handled, the other work is just very, very superficial.
So, yeah. Well, listen, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nakia. Round of applause for a great job.